Stop appendix carrying that taser and listen up, because your boy's about to give you all the details that you need to know in order to window shop for a weird little pistol caliber carbine that you probably can't find ammo for. Today we're taking a look at Palmetto State Armory's ARV. What is up, guys? My name is John with PewPewTactical.com, your definitive source for gear reviews, gun guides, and all things that go bang, even if they aren't in front of me. Those of you that have been with the channel for a little bit have probably already heard my shtick about the weirdness of being a host that routinely is tasked with telling you about all sorts of different guns and my various takeaways from them, and how strange that is when most of those guns are AR-15 centric. That being said, I'm pretty stoked anytime I get the chance to play with anything that's maybe a little bit weirder or not an AR-15, even if it's only ever so slightly removed from the AR-15 platform. And to that extent, while PSA is definitely more well-known for their slew of reasonably affordable ARs, and more recently AKs, they've also kind of always had this recurring theme of creating mutant guns by mashing parts from different firearms together. And the fact that they generally run pretty well is neat on an engineering level, if nothing else. PSA's ARV falls pretty squarely into that latter category. The gun's essentially an AR-15 adjacent pistol caliber carbine, I forget which pronunciation pisses people off the most, but just assume that I mean that one, and the gun takes either Scorpion Evo magazines or Palmetto's own proprietary AKV mags, the AKV being their own take on the PP19 Vityaz. As one might expect, that means you've got some reasonably superficial AR-15-esque features mixed in with a slew of ARV-specific parts that, altogether, kind of feel like an off-brand, best-value, direct blowback MPX. And to be clear, that's not at all intended as a dig. The specific ARV that we got to play with out in Vegas a few months back was the 10.5-inch pistol variant, but as you'd expect from Palmetto State Armory, there are a bunch of different configurations and barrel lengths that will probably all be gobbled up in about 3 minutes or so when 5 of them are put into stock on a random weekday. From front to back, you've got a standard A2 birdcage flash hider sitting on that 10.5-inch barrel, surrounded by a PSA 9-inch M-LOK handguard with M-LOK slots at the 3, 6, and 9 o'clock positions, and Picatinny rail segments that sit flush with the receiver's optic rail up top. Speaking of the receiver, indeed, both the upper and lower here are proprietary and specific to the ARV, which means you unfortunately aren't going to be able to slap an ARV lower directly onto an existing AR9 setup if that was your plan. However, while we didn't really get the chance to test out anything outside of the stock components, allegedly the gun should accept other direct blowback 9mm barrels as well, and the barrel nut itself is standard AR9 stuff, so you can throw in different handguards, your own barrel. As always, anytime you start adding stuff from weirder and weirder or small niche manufacturers, you might run into problems, but it should work, and it's kinda cool knowing that you're not gonna be stuck with some super boutique gun that only accepts its own parts. And as you might expect, considering the gun-specific upper, the ARV has its own proprietary BCG as well. Technical stuff out of the way, we ran probably close to 500 rounds through the ARV in a race against rapidly fading daylight, and encountered 0 issues during that admittedly kind of short eval period. It's always worth noting that Gen 1 PSA stuff can be a bit finicky, especially when they're essentially engineering new weird-ass guns that didn't exist before this from the ground up. So keep that in mind if this thing has piqued your interest at all. It could very well be that issues might only become apparent as you get into the 1,000 round count and beyond. Who knows, but PSA also has a pretty damn good track record on setting things right when mishaps do occur. That all being said, this thing is a blast to plink away with, especially considering that we don't really get the chance to play with AR pistol builds in our specific neck of the woods. But by all means, please continue to stay mad at the fact that we're a gun channel based out of California in the comments section below. If you've ever put rounds through a 9mm AR, or an AR pistol, or a pistol caliber carbine, or a pistol caliber pistol, take your pick, you're gonna be in pretty familiar territory here. There's nothing super amazing to write home about performance-wise. It's about what you would expect from a 9mm AR-esque platform, but that's not also necessarily a reason to knock it either. If you're a person that kind of is already into those things, I imagine you're probably going to be pretty stoked on the ARV. Once we got the MRO, we decided to run on it all dialed in. Repeated hits on steel at a variety of medium and close ranges felt super fluid and natural, even in slightly strange shooting positions and while on the move. One thing I will say that could either be viewed as a bug or a feature, depending on your personal preferences, is that the bolt release on the ARV takes almost no force whatsoever to operate. And what I mean by that is that when you have the bolt locked back on an empty magazine and you go to put a new mag in, the act of putting that new mag in itself or giving it a good tap to make sure that it is seated correctly is often enough force to send that bolt home itself and chamber a live round, which for what I was doing with the ARV that day, personally, that's fine. Obviously, if I'm putting a loaded mag into an empty gun with the bolt locked back, I'm probably about to go hot with it. But I can see how that might also be concerning if you're not expecting that, or if you're shooting on some super fud-ass range, etc. You get the idea. Whether or not that's how all ARVs behave, I can't really say, but the point is that it is something that you should be aware of, and obviously continue to be safety conscious no matter what. While I've shot a bunch of Glock mag-based AR-9s before, I actually think I prefer the fact that the ARV's proprietary Scorpion Evo clone magazine things are much beefier and more substantial than even Glock big stick magazines, and as a result, reloads felt much smoother as the mechanical action of grabbing a new mag from my chest rig was way more similar to the sort of beer can grip that's pretty much standard muscle memory for me when reloading an AR-15. And obviously I'm not Captain High Speed or anything like that, but for me personally, the thinner profile of even extended, longer pistol magazines feel a bit wonky when you're trying to go fast and nail a reasonably fast reload. It's a lot less material to grab. And obviously it's because I don't really train or drill with anything that is Glock mag based, and if you do, it's probably not a problem, but for me it is. I also found that the ARV's magazines actually fit really well in my Cryrig's single AR mag pouches, and that's even without cranking the retention down at all and running them open top. They're just beefy enough to take up enough space, and even when moving around, didn't really feel like they were going to become dislodged or like I was going to drop them or whatever. In short, mag's good. And like I mentioned before, the gun should be compatible with actual Scorpion Evo mags, if for whatever reason you happen to be sitting on a cache of those, though obviously we didn't get the chest to tance that. Happened to be sitting on a cache of those for whatever reason, though obviously we didn't get a test to chance that. Fuck, brain's doing all sorts of cool brain shit today. And like I said before, the ARV should be doing weird hand stuff. As I mentioned, the ARV actually should be compatible with normal Scorpion Evo mags as well, if you happen to be sitting on a cache of those for whatever reason, though we didn't have any of those in the desert, so we didn't get a chance to test them. It's also worth mentioning that the PSA mags have a maximum capacity of 35 rounds, and I believe we were maxing them out each time. No issues, they fit and fed well. The trigger is PSA's normal single-staged enhanced polish trigger, or EPT, found on many of their other rifles, and it does the job just fine, but isn't particularly notable. As one might expect, the recoil impulse of a 9mm round coming out of anything more substantial than a handgun is basically non-existent, even with no fancy muzzle devices at play. So all things considered, is the ARV worth taking a look at? In my personal opinion, if you're already considering picking up a 9mm AR platform and aren't sitting on a stash of big stick Glock magazines, I'd definitely consider it. With a full gun MSRP of $900 or so and build kits available for a little more than half of that, it's a cool enough platform that on an aesthetic level, I personally feel beats out the kind of strange looking straight magazine visuals normally found on Glock-based AR9s. And the fact that the PSA, AKV, ARV, Evo magazines, whatever, both look and feel better while running the gun definitely give it a leg up in my book. Again, maybe do some research and be aware of exactly what you're getting into with a first generation PSA gun, but overall, I think it's a rad little piece that's perfect if you're into that kind of bootleg MPX, not really a subgun kind of flair. Alright guys, that's gonna do it for us today. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the content, please go ahead and subscribe to the channel, as I've got lots more grammatical errors on the way. We also have shirts. You can find links to the shirts down in the description. Once again, my name is John with Pew Pew Tactical, and we will see you next time. Though we didn't get the chest... Fuck! I was trying specifically not to! Brain, you have betrayed me.